Today, we're diving into the high-stakes world of corporate finance. And really, it's a story about an endless battle between two opposing forces. The corporate heist, fraud, and the security system built to stop it, which we call internal control.
And if you're wondering why this all matters, just think back to those massive scandals. Enron, WorldCom. These weren't just little accounting oopsies. They were colossal failures of trust that absolutely wiped out companies and vaporized people's life savings. So, the big question is, how on earth does something like that even happen? Well, let's get into it.
First things first, before you can build a defense, you've got to understand the crime, right? You have to know what you're up against. So let's start by dissecting the anatomy of a fraud. So for something to legally be called fraud, it actually has to check all 5 of these boxes. It all starts with a lie, a false representation about a material fact, something important enough to change your mind. The person telling the lie has to know they're lying, that's the intent. Then, the victim has to have reasonably relied on that lie. And finally, and this is key, that lie has to cause some kind of real financial damage. It's a pretty high bar to clear, but as we know, it gets cleared in some pretty spectacular ways.
So what pushes someone to attempt this kind of heist in the first place? Well, criminologists have this amazing concept called the fraud triangle. Think of it as the perfect storm for bad behavior. First, you've got pressure. Maybe someone's in deep personal debt, or there's insane pressure from the top to hit unrealistic targets. Second, there's an opportunity, a weak spot in the company's defenses that they think they can exploit. And third, you need a weak ethical compass, the ability to rationalize the crime. I'm just borrowing it, or everyone else is doing it. When those 3 things line up, boom, the risk of fraud just skyrockets.
Now, the people who commit these acts usually fall into one of 2 camps. On one side, you have employee fraud. This is often that classic inside job, an employee skimming a little cash here and there or faking expense reports. But then you have management fraud, and this is the big one. This is when the people at the top orchestrate a scheme to deliberately mislead everyone, usually by cooking the books to make the company seem way more successful than it actually is.
Okay, so whether it's an employee trying to fund a lavish lifestyle or executives trying to fool Wall Street, how do they actually pull it off? Let's crack open the fraudster's playbook and look at the 3 main schemes they run.
Play number 1 is probably the most damaging: fraudulent statements. This is pure, deliberate financial manipulation. Management might inflate revenue numbers, hide massive debts off the books, or do what WorldCom did. They took billions in regular expenses and pretended they were long-term investments, which instantly made their profits look huge. And the motivation? You guessed it, it's often tied directly to those massive executive bonuses.
The second play in the book is corruption. This one is all about abusing your position of power. It could be bribery, paying someone to alter records or look the other way. Or maybe it's a kickback scheme, where a manager gets a secret payout from a supplier in exchange for giving them a juicy contract. It's all about using your authority, not for the company, but for your own wallet.
And the third play, asset misappropriation, is by far the most common type of fraud out there. This is just straight-up theft. We're talking about everything from skimming cash out of the register before it's even recorded, to padding expense reports with fake receipts, or even creating ghost employees who don't exist and then pocketing their paychecks.
All right, so we've seen the criminal's playbook. It's pretty clever, right? But now let's flip the script and look at the other side of this battle. It's time to talk about the company's shield, the system of internal control.
So what is internal control, really? The best way to think about it is as the company's own internal security system. It's the whole web of policies and procedures designed to do one thing: protect the company's assets, make sure the financial records are trustworthy, and just generally keep the entire operation running smoothly and ethically.
A good security system like this is really trying to accomplish 4 main things. 1. Safeguard the assets. Stop people from walking out the door with cash or inventory. 2. Make sure the accounting records are accurate and reliable. No more cooking the books. 3. Promote efficiency, so the business isn't wasting time or money. And 4. Make sure everyone is actually following the rules management set out.
But, and this is a huge but, we have to have a reality check here. No system is ever perfect. You can have the best security system in the world, but it can still be defeated by simple human error by a group of people working together, that's called collusion, or, and this is a big one, by a senior manager who just decides they're above the rules and overrides the whole system. So, because no single control is ever going to be foolproof, a good security system has to have layers, like an onion. And that brings us to a really smart 3-part strategy: prevent, detect, and correct.
I love this analogy because it makes so much sense. Your first layer of defense is preventative controls. These are your walls, your locks. They're designed to stop fraud before it can even get started. Things like requiring a manager's signature on any big purchase. But if someone gets past the walls, you need your second layer, detective controls. These are your alarms and security cameras. They're designed to find a problem after it's happened, like doing a bank reconciliation to spot a weird transaction. And finally, if an alarm goes off, you need your corrective controls. This is your response team, the people who come in and fix the problem, whether that means firing someone or patching a hole in the software.
So, how do companies actually build all these layers? Well, thankfully, they don't have to start from scratch. There's an industry-standard blueprint that lays out the 5 essential components you need for a really solid control system.
It's called the COSO framework, and it all starts with the control environment. This is the foundation, the ethical tone that leadership sets. It's the company culture. Next, you do a risk assessment. Where are we weak? Where could someone attack? Then you've got information and communication, which is just about making sure the right info gets to the right people. Monitoring is crucial. It means you're constantly checking to make sure your security system is actually working. And finally, you have the control activities. These are the specific, on-the-ground policies and procedures you put in place to shut down those risks.
Let's zoom in on those control activities because this is where the rubber really meets the road. We're talking about things like, you guessed it, requiring authorization for transactions, keeping detailed accounting records so you have an audit trail, restricting access to sensitive computer systems, and having a fresh pair of eyes independently verify someone's work. But out of all of these, there's one that stands above the rest as maybe the most important of all: segregation of duties.
Segregation of duties, or SOD for short, is probably the single most powerful fraud prevention tool there is. The idea is so simple but so effective. You make sure that no single person has control over an entire critical process from start to finish. You break up the tasks. For instance, the person who approves a payment can't be the same person who actually writes and signs the check. It's exactly like needing 2 different people with 2 different keys to open a bank vault. It forces teamwork and creates an automatic check on power.
And that brings us right back to where we started. We've seen the fraudster's playbook, and we've seen the company's multi-layered security system. It really is a constant cat and mouse game. So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. As the criminals get smarter and technology keeps changing the game, can a company's defenses ever be truly perfect? Or will there always be a way for someone to plan the next big heist?